Hi friends, welcome back to Rafting Magazine. It's Trevor and I feel super lucky to have all these boats in one place. I had a question from a subscriber. I spent about 45 minutes, maybe an hour talking to him on the phone about the differences between these boats. So I figured I'd make a video, share it all with you. We're gonna talk about the Air Cub, the Sotar SL, and we're gonna talk about the High-Side Mini Max. So what's the difference between these boats? Let's find out. First boat construction we're gonna talk about, High-Side Mini Max. Now the High-Side Mini Max is a rubber boat, so you've got basically rubber sandwiching a nylon mesh. On the floor, we have an I-beam floor, and that I-beam floor is glued to the tubes. And the outside tubes, you have two tubes with a baffle right in the middle. One of the cool things that High-Side added that is kind of a good quality of life feature is this urethane chafer on the bottom. Back in the day, I used to have a High-Side that had a rubber chafer, and this thing would stick to everything. And that is one of the issues with rubber material, is that when you hit a rock, it's gonna stick to that rock, and it's gonna be one of the stickiest materials out there. So just from a material standpoint, something to bear in mind about boat performance. But this urethane chafer makes it a bit more slippery, and it adds some durability to the bottom of the boat. So one thing I do wanna zoom in on is these joints in the tubes where they come together. So our seams with this boat are on the outside. They've taken the tube and wrapped it around like that and then sandwiched it together. The way these things are built is typically you'll have one of these strips on the inside of the boat, one on the outside, sandwiching it together, so it's gonna hold it together. Now everything on a High-Side is actually glued, so you can see on the outside of this there's just a little tiny bit of the bead of glue that goes around, but that is one of the things to think about with a High-Side boat, that it is a glued seam. Basically the fibers are getting bound together by that glue and pulling on the fibers. So it can be a little prone to failure, and delamination is one of the issues, and I'll show you that in a second. But this is kind of what the seam looks like, and this is a pretty standard seam design for most boats, where they're gonna take those seams and they're gonna sandwich two pieces of seam tape together. So let's go into the boat and I'll show you what a little bit of delamination looks like. This is pretty typical for glued boats. A lot of these rubber boats that are glued together, they're gonna have these delamination issues eventually, because the bond that's holding this thwart into the outer tube is just the glue. So that's why people kind of tell you to rough up the surface a bit, because you want to have as awesome of a bond as possible by having something for the glue to grab onto. Now eventually this is going to delaminate, and one of the issues that you're going to have is that you're going to have a lot of rocks and things like that getting in here. It's going to start to abrade it, and then it's only going to exacerbate that delamination issue. So this is something I'm going to need to take care of pretty quick. I'm going to need to glue this down, but let's take a look at the Air Cub. Construction on the Air Cub is pretty cool. What I really like about it is that the boat is PVC on the outside. On the inside, there's a urethane bladder that sits in every one of the tubes on the boat. So not only is it the outside tube and the floor and the thwarts, everything has this urethane bladder on the inside. So you kind of have a double layer of protection. You get a little bit of the best of both worlds with the urethane, and it's a little thinner urethane on the inside, so it's a little more pliable. It's really easy to patch too. So if you have any problems with this, one of the cool things, you can unzip it, that is the PVC shell, and then pull out the urethane bladder. If you've torn through the boat and the bladder, you can pull that bladder out, you put a patch on it on this PVC, drop a new bladder in, screw the valve back on, blow it back up after it's zipped up, and you're good to go. So that's a cool thing about Air. What they do is that they just kind of make the maintenance a little bit easier. Now, the air cell floor it's interesting. It's basically this PVC envelope that encloses a urethane floor, and it's somewhat of an I-beam floor, maybe not as pronounced as some of the other boats, but this does fill with water. And when you are on the water, what's going to happen with this floor is when it's filled up, you're gonna have a lot of weight in the bottom of the boat. So the boat is really light right now, but that water is gonna add extra weight, and then it's gonna lower your center of gravity. So that's a cool feature about the Air boats that I like. And the floor is laced in. So it's laced in with two little ropes here, and then your thwart's attached to the floor via the ropes there. So that's kind of cool how everything's kind of modular. If you have an issue with the floor gets ripped out, you need a new floor, you can sew it back in. But let's take a look at some of these seams right here, and let's talk about those and a little bit about their process with welding. So unlike the glued seams on the rubber High-Side or any rubber boat that you're gonna get, the Air boats are plastic boats, and both the Air and the Sotar are plastic, and they have different welding types. So the type of weld here, This is just a thermal heat weld, and what you can see is the two pieces are just overlapped like that, and I think it's maybe about a little less than an inch that's overlapped here, and then they're welded together. So these two pieces are bonded completely, and they are one piece of plastic for all intents and purposes. We also have the same on the floor chafer down here, and it doesn't need to be super strong to hold in the air because the air is held in by the bladder on the inside. So the cool thing is this has no baffles and it's not adding weight from the baffles. It does, however, have two bladders that stick up against each other, and I believe it's on the other side here in the bow, but they just push up against each other. So you're gonna hear a lot of weird noises when you blow these boats up, but that's just part of the process, and you wanna make sure that you're not overinflating one baffle or the other, because again, they're not the full thickness like you would get on a Sotar or a high side. So when you look at the thickness of this material, the material on the inside is going to be not quite as thick. So that's just the seam. When we look at the D-rings on this thing, the D-rings are kind of cool, and what was explained to me is that these D-rings aren't welded on. This D-ring from the outside, this D-ring, and Air's a little hush-hush on this. They don't, it's all pretty proprietary, so I don't like to let this out too much, but they did tell me that this is just this outer shell piece that they put a cut in, and then on the back side they've welded the D-ring onto it. So you've got all the cam webbing from the D-ring right behind this, and then a patch welded on that. So that's why there's this depression here. So that's gonna prevent this from tearing all the way out, or if it does tear, it's only gonna tear to the periphery of this weld right here. And it's pretty easy to patch in case there was an issue, because again, you can take the bladders out and get inside there and work on it. So that's a little bit of what the Air is. And now let's move over to the Sotar and we'll check out some of the construction of the Sotar. Now the Sotar is urethane, and the urethane is basically impregnated with strands that a lot of these other ones are. Sotar does have some other materials that they can make boats out of, and what's cool is they do a lot of custom work. So this material, there are other stronger versions that have different additives in it. So that's cool that the owner of Sotar is playing around with different material types. But as far as construction goes, you got an I-beam floor, just like the high side. You have 4 tubes standard on a Sotar SL. Now, it is possible to have less tubes. So basically, you only have 2 baffles instead of 4. That might change the price, and it might change some of the durability issues. Unlike the other boats, this does have 4 chambers. So something to think about. This floor is actually sewn into the side of the boat, so there's a grommet strip on the inside. And then this great quality of life is having these flaps here. So instead of running some sort of line along the bottom of your boat, or trying to get your fingers in tiny drain holes, they build in this flap. And this flap you can pretty much grab from anywhere on the boat, and it's basically like a handle on the other side of the boat that can help you pull in. But they can also take this off as well if you're looking to save weight, or you just don't care about it. It's the cool thing about these guys is they're super customizable. So let's zoom in and we're going to talk about the seams and just look at that real quick and show you what Sotar has to offer there. The cool thing about a Sotar is it's a plastic boat. So because it's a plastic boat, that means all of their seams can be welded. So this seam right here, we have, just like in the high side Minimax, we have 2 pieces overlapping here, and they are going to be a strip of tape on the inside and a strip of tape on the outside. So you're going to get kind of a double layer of protection on each of these seams. And then they're welded, so that means everything in this seam, just like in the Air Cub, is going to be one solid piece. And this is a different type of welding that Air uses, I think. So the manufacturers are a little bit hush-hush on this kind of stuff. So some manufacturers use just a thermal heat welding, whereas others use an RF weld where they bombard it with radio frequency sciencey stuff. But again, they don't like to talk to me about that. So I can tell you that one is stronger than the other. I have seen some studies about it that talks about those 2 different welding types. What you're gonna get is all welded seams around this thing. So again, delamination is not gonna happen on this boat. It is all one solid piece for these welds right here. Also, when we look at these patches, any patch that's attached to the outside, these 2 pieces are essentially melted together, and this is just one piece of plastic underneath the black here. Sotar does add these handles on a lot of their boats If you want to save some weight, you can always request that you have these handles removed, and so it's just the D-ring, or you can even get smaller D-rings. That's going to save a little bit of weight too. The other play boats that we're looking at don't have a lot of handles. The Air Cub doesn't have any, and the Mini Max only has the bow and stern handles. So again, if you want to save some weight, that's an option. There's a couple different weight saving things that you can do in this boat. Again, like having one less baffle on either side to have 2 tubes. Again, up to you, up to your preferences, but that might save some weight and might save some cost with a Sotar, since pretty much everything they do is custom work. Now, let's hop over and we're gonna look at the seat, because I wanna talk about the slipperiness of this boat. We're in really close here because I wanna show you this Liquid Lex coating that they put on it. So this Liquid Lex is a type of urethane, and it has a bunch of impurities in it. And so the reason they put this on here is because the normal Sotar fabric is gonna have this UV coating that's super slick. So if you get on this boat without this coating, it just feels like butter. You're gonna sit on it and just be like, and slide right off. So Sotar sprays this on, and you can see some of these little impurities in here and little bumps, and it's designed to be more sticky. So most of the boat's not sticky so you can slide over rocks, but you want this part to be sticky so your butt stays on the tube. We should talk about weight. Let's carry this thing down to the river. When a lot of people are talking to me about play boats, one of the things that they stress about quite a bit is the weight of a boat. Now, you know, you get your typical 14-foot boat. Most people are familiar with commercial rafts, and they're familiar with these big, monstrous barges that they move around. However, with play boats, we don't have to worry about that. Weight is super helpful because, you know, someone can shoulder the boat, two small people can carry the boat really easily. When you're talking about a 125, 150 pound boat, that's really hard for 2 people to carry. But if you're to cut that weight in half, it makes it a lot easier and makes that load a lot less. So a lot of people can even grab the boat with their kids and carry it down to the river. So when we look at weight, starting with the high side, this one's a 71 pound boat. I believe the Sotar is gonna be 85 pounds and Air Cub is gonna be 67. Now, one of the things to note about the Air Cub, because of the air cell floor filling with water, once you've been on the water, if you go to pick it up right out of the water, that water takes a little bit to drain. So initially it's gonna be a little bit heavier than, I mean, it'll feel probably about the weight of this Sotar, maybe a little bit more. And then as that water drains, it'll get a lot lighter. But if you wanna flex on the kayakers, grabbing a boat like this, throwing it over your shoulder, or walking straight down to the river with your kids in tow, great way to do it. Now I want to talk about seating and thwart placement. So sitting in this boat, this is a high side Mini Max. The floor is pretty low down, and I like that because it gives me a lot of room in this boat. Being a taller guy, I do have a little bit of trouble in these 17-inch tube boats. They sit really low, and I'm kind of you can see me, I'm kind of scrunched down like this. So one of the things that is a little tough for me in this high side boat is the fact that these thwarts are permanently attached in one place. So you can't move them, they're glued in, they come from the factory like that, and there's no adjustment for the thwarts. Good to sit in a high side Mini Max if you have one available in your area, you see one at put-in, just walk up to someone and say, hey man, can I sit in that for a second and just check it out? Folks would be happy to let you sit in their boat and check it out and see if you like it. And, you know, ask them some questions. We're all gearheads out here anyway. We love talking about boats. That's why you're watching this video right now. So just sit in the boat and see how you like it. If it doesn't fit for you, like for me, I like to have my knee just behind my ankle down here. And my knee is actually spanning the entire length of the compartment here. Now for someone like Kaylee, it's a little bit more comfortable of a boat stock. But again, she doesn't have all the adjustment that she wants. So my body position is a little out of place here. And so if you want a little bit more customization, we're gonna move over to the other 2 boats and check those out and show you what those look like. Here in the Sotar, the thwarts are adjustable. They got a really cool system. It's basically a 3-strap system that comes off the side of the thwart and it laces to the floor webbing. Now, that's infinitely customizable. However you wanna set it up, you can take them out, put a frame on it. You can slide them forward, slide them back. You can even make them go at little angles. So a lot of times when I paddle with Kaylee, what we'll do is we'll set the front thwart so it's even, so we're both at the same spot forward, but we'll take the back thwart and I'll pull her side forward a little bit so she gets that good body position to be able to make the moves that she needs to make. And here, this is pretty much exactly where I want it. My knee is just about to the end of my ankle here. So that's really where I want to be sitting in this boat. But the other cool thing about the Sotar system is that the 3 buckles do not have any metal on them, so you're not going to be grinding any metal into your foot with this one. So let's hop over to the air and take a look at that one. Got a lot of love for how they built this. This one, just like the Sotar, has movable thwarts. I really love that about the thwarts. I think it's just a superior system because you're going to be able to move it around for different size paddlers. Kaylee and I, we're going to have thwarts kind of moving like this, just because it helps quite a bit with our body positioning and body posture. If the thwarts are set up for me, but not for Kaylee, she's going to have a really hard time making those paddle strokes. So it's good to be able to move these, especially if you have kids or, like I said, different size paddlers. Now, Air's thwarts, on the sides, they're kind of shaped like this, and they do have these straps, this dual strap system that goes down into the floor, straps onto the floor ropes, and then keeps these thwarts where they want to be. So it's really cool that they have this option to move it around. And one of the things that is a little bit concerning is the zipper system. You do have to watch your split rings, and I actually have a damaged split ring in this boat that I need to change out. But you want to make sure that the split rings are in good condition so they're not catching on your shoelaces and things like that. So that is a little bit of a concern. And also when you're wearing sandals, you might rub against the zipper down here. But let's go ahead and look at the floor and the water line and talk about that in the boat and see what these boats look like and how they stack up. So let's talk about rocker and water line. And I'm gonna start with the Cub here. The Cub is kind of the intermediate boat of the 3. So the Cub has a good amount of rocker. It's a little wider than the Minimax, a little narrower than the Sotar, smaller tubes than the Sotar. But when we look at this, call it the water line, it's the part of the boat, the part of the rocker that's touching the water. When you look at this, you got a good amount of rocker, but not a ton. So the rocker kind of starts about right here where the thwarts are and then goes up, and it's a nice, even rocker. So it's kind of good to look at. It's also called the kick. If you were to put a flat board here, figuring out how far up the bow and stern go off the water, that would be the kick. So when you're looking at that, this will show in all of their numbers when you look at the specs and dimensions for these boats and their wireframes that they put on their websites. But I can tell you from a purely anecdotal perspective, I can feel a difference in this boat compared to a Sotar and compared to the Minimax. Now, again, I say this is the intermediate boat. It's probably got intermediate in terms of middle stability and then middle looseness. So as you're trying to get that rotation speed and getting a good amount of rocker to boof off of drops, this one's a really good boat. It boofs really well, it goes off of drops really well, and it just has a good general shape to it. So let's flip over to the Sotar. Looking at the rocker and water line of this boat, Sotar does come up quite a bit. It does have a really good amount of kick in the front, but you'll notice, unlike the other 2 boats, this is made in sections. So you can see lots of different small tube sections that play in to making that curvature. But you do have little hard breaks in that. So that can influence the way that this boat moves in the water. It's also a little bit wider, so it's gonna spin a little bit more slowly. And the more rocker you have, the quicker you're gonna whip around. So we'll talk about rotation, we'll go out on the water and show you that in just a second. But when you're thinking about the boat design, these designs that have a ton of rocker are gonna feel really loose. They're not gonna track as well. The Sotar is gonna track a little bit better because it's got a little bit flatter of a design. When you look at the floor itself, the floor is really kind of flat for a good ways and then kind of goes down. When we talk about the Air Cub, that's a really flat floor. So you're gonna have a little bit of difference in performance, but they're gonna be pretty similar. So this is the 11-foot Sotar. It's not a 10.5 like these other boats are. And Sotar makes them in 1-foot intervals. So you're gonna have a 10-foot SL or you're gonna have an 11-foot SL. These are both play boats, but this boat is going to be a little bit longer and therefore be a little bit flatter than say one of the other ones. However, what you'll notice when you get into a 10-foot SL, that shortness, it will make it feel a little bit more flippy. But the thing to remember about the Sotars is that the tubes are quite a bit larger than some of these other boats. And they're all diminishing tubes, and they're all pretty loose and have a pretty good water line, but you'll notice that the width of the Sotar tubes will make it a little bit more stable, and that's why I say of the three, it's probably the most stable. So let's take a look at the Mini-Max. So we got the Mini-Max here. You can see the curvature. It's got a really nice curvature. It's got rocker all the way from one side to the other. There's a little bit of a section, but it's a lot shorter than the other two boats. And so that nice curvature is gonna make this boat boof really well. It's gonna feel really loose. It's gonna turn really fast, but it's also gonna contribute to instability on the boat. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. But when we look at this boat, we're looking at this beautiful curvature to the boat. And not only does it have curvature front and back, but it's got curvature kind of in every dimension of it. So I like Highside's design in that. This boat's a really fun boat, but I'd also call it a really advanced boat. I got this boat when I wasn't so great at class 4 and 5 boating, and I had a lot of swims. Kaylee and I went out on a bunch of stuff, swam a bunch of stuff, and pretty much got wrecked quite a bit. And mostly it has to do with how loose this boat is and how you have to really, really drive this boat. That's kind of the difference between this and the other boats, is that those boats will drive themselves a little bit. This one, if you're not fully engaged, you're putting this boat where it needs to go, you're gonna have some trouble with it. And honestly, if you're not a really advanced boater, you might have some trouble in one of these boats. So let's hop on the water, and I'm gonna show you some stuff about stability and turning in these boats, and a few of the differences that we're gonna experience in them. When I looked at the rotation speed of each of these boats, I got on the water and I did 3 rotations, and on the 3rd rotation, I paddled as hard as I could to figure out how fast I rotated. In the Mini-Max, it took me 4 paddle strokes to rotate at a speed of 5.01 seconds. In the Sotar, did the same method, and to do the same rotation, again, it took me 4 strokes, maximum power. It took me 5 seconds even to make that rotation. The Cub was a little faster, to my surprise. In this methodology, 3 rotations, and then my last rotation, maximum rotation, it took me 4.94 seconds to rotate the Cub 360 degrees. I'd never tried this test before, but I thought it was an interesting test to determine how fast the boat rotates. So down here we've got the edge of the boat, and the edge of the boat is the point at which the boat no longer needs lots of input to want to flip. So what I'm gonna do to show you the stability of the boat is I'm gonna roll it over onto its edge to the point of just about flipping, or maybe it'll flip over on me. But I want to show you where that point is, and then we will keep the camera in the same place and keep the boats in the same place, try to get a good accurate measurement of this. So I'm gonna pull it up right there. That's about the edge. So it wants to go over on top of me. So this is about where the flip point is. And again, width and rocker is going to determine that. All right, let's see what the Sotar's got for me. And this might be a little harder. It feels like it's going to be a bit tougher because the boat's sitting flatter on the ground. So let's see what she's got. That's about the edge right there. It took me a lot to get it there too, so, you know, that initial amount of force it takes to get it over, in this boat it's gonna be a lot higher than the Cub. So let's go ahead and look at the Highside. Honestly, this is the first time I've ever done a side-by-side comparison of these boats, trying to flip them over on the shore. So, let's see how it goes. Highside. Oh, that's it. I fell. Okay, let me try that again with maybe less force, because I didn't need that much. All right, not there yet. Not there yet. That's the edge right there. I mean, it's probably about right there that I'm kind of balancing. Yeah, that goes over real quick. One of the last considerations boaters often have when they are looking at rafts is rolling and storage. So the question is, do you have space for this boat where you're gonna be? Now, the Highside is a rubber boat. It rolls really easily because rubber is much more pliable than, say, urethane or PVC. So in all of these boats, we went over the construction of them already, but rubber boats, they're gonna roll the tightest and get to be the smallest boats possible when you need to roll them up. So you can see the Highside, very compact. This airboat with the PVC and urethane, it's gonna be a little harder to roll. It still rolls pretty well. PVC, you know, to its credit, does roll pretty decently, especially after you've used it for a while. The Sotar though, it's kind of tough. I mean, this is straight out of the factory, so this is a fresh, brand new boat, but you can see like this is about as good as I could get it because of all the baffles and how they roll and fold. So really what you want to be doing with plastic boats, and really most boats, is you want to store them partially inflated and somewhat soft. So the question is, do you have a place for it? You have a garage, something like that. That's certainly a consideration for this. And then if you're storing it outside, you got to make sure you have some sort of cover or something that is going to protect it from UV damage. So another big consideration, can you protect it from UV damage? And if not, you might have to roll it and drop it in some storage unit. Let me give you some of my parting thoughts on these boats. So first I want to talk about price before I talk about anything else. It really depends on your price point, and you really need to understand how much you want to spend on a boat. So think about your budget. You know, Minimax, last time I checked, it was $2,900, but it might have gone up to $31. I'll put a little thing there that'll tell us exactly how much when I go look it up at home. But that boat is definitely going to be your least expensive option. Comes with it less customization options. So that's something to think about as well. But that's going to be your least expensive option. If you're moving from an entry-level boat to this boat as your first play boat, I mean, it's going to be a really good option for that. Now, the Air Cub, Air has an interesting pricing structure. They don't include thwarts with it. So just make sure when you look at the boat price, you also look at the price of the thwarts. You got some more customization options, and you have a little bit more stability. Not as much looseness, so if you're looking for a really loose play boat, then that one is surprisingly fun. If you're really looking for a loose play boat designed for just play boating, and that's all you're gonna do with it. If you're looking for something you want to do a little bit more with, maybe take the kids out, or you know, maybe hop in with your partner and you don't want to get a divorce, you know, this might be a better option for you. If you really don't want to get a divorce, then probably go to the Sotar. Sotar is going to be $5,100 thereabouts. So this one is considerably more expensive. However, you are getting a lot more customization options, and some of the things on this boat you don't necessarily need to include. You can talk to Sotar, see if they can build you a boat with maybe 2 chambers instead of 4 on the outside, and with 2 less baffles. That's definitely, well, I don't want to say definitely because I can't speak for Sotar, but it should reduce the price a little bit. You can strip a few things off of it, and you can talk to them. I chat with them quite a bit about stripping things off of boats and reducing prices. So, you know, I definitely have given them some recommendations. But if you want some recommendations, you know, you got a little floor chafer, that little flap, maybe the handles, maybe reducing the amount of baffles, things like that. You can talk to them about options. But Sotar is really great because you get infinite color options. If you want every panel to be different, they'll do that for you. I mean, there's gonna be a premium, but you know, every panel can be different. So you're paying for a lot with Sotar, but you're also getting a lot in terms of customization and things you want to do to the boat. So whatever you want, they'll do it for you. Just talk to them. That's a matter of price. So if price is not your concern, then yeah, go for a Sotar. So as far as overall thoughts and just my final parting thoughts on the boat, I-Side, probably your most advanced boat in terms of your skill level. You're gonna get a lot more out of it if your skill level is higher. If you are a less experienced boater, you're not gonna get as much out of that boat because you're gonna be freaked out because you're gonna be flipping all the time. I mean, it's just easy to flip. That's the one thing I'd say about that boat. However, again, super fun play boat. Air Cub, this is gonna be kind of in between the two. So it's in between the two in price. It's in between the two in terms of the slipperiness of the boat. It's in between the two in terms of stability, turning, rocker, the whole thing. It's kind of in between these two boats. So if you want the good intermediate boat, yeah, grab a Cub. And I mean, they're great boats, they're fun boats, super solid, and they're gonna last you a while. If you want all the customization options, you want every bell and whistle on it, then yeah, grab a Sotar. They're gonna be able to customize anything you want, tweak anything just the way you like it, and you're gonna have the boat that you want. You are gonna pay for it, so that is another concern with it. So that's kind of my rundown of the 3 boats. I hope this has helped. If you have questions, as always, drop those below. I'll drop some links to these boats. You can go talk to the manufacturers, say, hey, saw this video, want to get this boat, want to get that boat, want to get that boat. Whichever one you want, they're all out there. But just ask the questions. Make sure you're asking a lot of questions to the manufacturers. And if you have questions of me, I'm happy to answer them. So get a playboat. They're super fun. We'll see you downstream.